Hey, how y'all doing? This is Mongo Slade, and today we're going to talk about labor unions. We're going to talk about it again because the page has sort of been tiptoeing around the concept, which I know is probably just bullshit, but it's just something I want to talk about because I keep seeing this, I keep hearing this, and people are just, it's got to be political by now. Because anybody who wants to do the research on trade unions, even SAG, you need to look at what you're talking about. You need to go through it. Read about it. Don't just read, oh, what's the benefits of it? You have to look at the downside as well. Okay, so today we're going to talk about trade unions. I'm going to read an article from Mises, the Mises Institute, what is a libertarian institute. We're also going to go through the SAG website. So I'm going to show you that everything in SAG ain't all that good. Okay, it ain't good. But if people at the end of this video, and I have other sources. I just don't want to bury people in anti-union stuff. I just want to show people that these things aren't all as they cracked up to be. So let's talk about Paige. First, we need to realize that Paige is retired. She's forcefully retired, which means Paige cannot work. It means she can't wrestle. So, in other words, Paige cannot produce for WWE. Her value is that she exists pretty much as somebody who injured herself in a WWE ring, and they just want to keep her under contract because she's probably a good ambassador for the women's evolution and all that type of stuff, right? So they're really doing her a favor by keeping her under contract. They really could just fire her because she really doesn't serve any purpose. She doesn't serve any purpose as on an on-screen role. She doesn't wrestle. She doesn't manage anybody. She doesn't do anything. She doesn't even do the panels, the pre-shows or the post-shows. She doesn't do Talking Smack, Talking Raw, or nothing else. What do they need Paige for? They don't need Paige. They really could just fire Paige. Or Paige could just say, look, I don't like this deal with y'all, whatever y'all doing with Twitch. I haven't done a video on the Twitch thing yet because I haven't figured out what it is yet. But she's not happy about it, which is fine. It's her business. She can be unhappy about it. But she doesn't do anything for WWE. Paige could simply just say, let me go. Fire me. Let me release me from my contract. Then she can be released from her contract. She can go do Twitch as much as she wants, and 100% of that money will be hers. If that's what she wants to do, which would be easy, right? So what is the purpose of this whole union threat? Well, it's obviously because she just wants to have her hand in both baskets. She wants to get paid for being Paige. She also wants to get paid for utilizing WWE intellectual property and the fame and all that type of stuff that they provided for her. She doesn't want to give them any money from it. They're probably not going to sue her over it because it's probably not a lot of money anyway. It's probably going to end up being the best way to deal with this thing is to just let her go. But let's talk about trade unions because I want to talk about trade unions. It's one of my favorite subjects and it's very corrupt. It's a very corrupt institution. I was just talking to somebody the other day about this, and they said to me, and I realized this, that you ever notice that the union bosses have $1 million contracts, but there are no $1 million union workers? None. Union bosses in the UAW got busted just this year. Earlier this year before the COVID hit, they were, well, probably last year then. It was probably last year, this year. Union bosses at the United Auto Workers got busted being corrupt. Because that's what unions are. Unions are corrupt institutions. But for people out there who say, Mongo, you're full of shit. We are on the side of the proletariat. Unions are good things. I'll say, no. No. But we're going to discuss this. Okay? Let's discuss this. Let's discuss this rationally. I will put forth the argument of why trade unions are bad. Okay? So, this article is called How Labor Unions Hurt Workers. It is written by George Reisman, and it was written in 2014. I'm going to skip down some because it's really jargony. It's one of those kind of academic things, but it's really jargony. The opening idea is pretty much telling you that the only way to really raise real wages, which is wages plus inflation, is by an increase in productivity. That's essentially what we're trying to get at here. So it says essentially they rise when with relative minor exceptions, real wages throughout the economic system simply do not rise from the side of higher money wages, meaning giving people more money does not increase real wages. Now wrestlers aren't uh, uh, by the hour workers anyway, right? A wrestler is what you would call a salaried performer. You get a salary per year. They say you sign a 5-year contract. Let's say $250,000 per year. That would be what for 5 years? That's $2.2 million or something. No, that's not $2.2 million. What the fuck am I talking about? That's $1.2 million. Whoa, what am my math is shit. I said two. Well, did say 250,000, right? 250,000 times two is 500. So that'd be for 5 years. Uh, that'd be $1.2 million. So if you have a $250,000 contract for 5 years, you're guaranteed $1 million at the end of that contract. Now you're not going to get a check for $1 million. You're going to get increments, right? That's how salaries work. You get whatever is in your contract, you get it in increments. So when you talk about trade unions, usually, like when I was talking about the UAW earlier, you're usually talking about individuals who are working in some type of plant or something like that, side to side with somebody else. They may be working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. A wrestler is not going to see anything near that, because WWE very rarely has a match that goes 30 minutes. So if you spend 30 minutes actually in the ring, most of your time is in preparing for the match, or in doing media. You may go do interviews or, Make-A-Wish stuff and all that type of stuff, which I'm guessing that's what the Twitch thing is. I said I haven't figured that out yet. So I haven't figured out like what Twitch is supposed to be as far as how they're counting it towards their monies and all that type of stuff. I haven't figured that part out. I don't understand it. I actually don't agree with it. So that's also something that I might as well say that here. I don't agree that WWE should be getting, but I think it's based off WWE's being the talent agent for the performer, which is old school stuff. Because the booking office used to get a piece of if you went to another territory. I have to explain that. Andre the Giant was signed by Vincent J. McMahon, and if you wanted to hire Andre the Giant, you would call Vincent J. McMahon, say, hey, I want Andre. They would say Andre's rate is this, and then this is what I get for you using Andre. Okay? Because he's an agent. Now, at that point, he would do the deal. Andre would go work the match. Vince would get his cut. Andre would get his cut. Everybody's happy. And in the territory, got paid from the gate or whatever, and that was kind of it. So that's pretty much, I'm guessing, is what WWE is trying to do with this Twitch thing. Is they're trying to say, okay, we're the talent agent for these performers. When you do these Twitch or something like that, we're gonna that's basically utilizing our intellectual property, our fan base, et cetera, we want a cut of whatever that is coming in. Similar to if Andre the Giant goes and does a movie, he's the talent agent, Vincent J. McMahon is the talent agent, he would get a cut of that. Similar, similar. And it sounds worse than it really is, because the talent is probably still going to get the bulk of the money. A talent agent doesn't get that much. I'm pretty sure. But a talent agent is supposed to have connections, and it's supposed to be able to get you all these spectacular jobs, which is how Sasha Banks was able to get on The Mandalorian. If you think she was going to get on The Mandalorian on her own, then you're naive. She got there because WWE put her in that spot. Similar to how wrestlers do commercials, because WWE picked that wrestler to do that commercial. That's kind of how talent scouting and talent agents work, which is why, when I said in a recent video that Kurt Angle was told he was going to do the Marine, or a movie, he said, but it was really just the Marine. And because it was a WWE film anyway. And then they changed their mind and they went with John Cena. Because WWE operates sometimes as a talent scout by sending different talent out to do different things, and they do get paid for that, because they actually found the talent. They do all of the necessary trainings, sending them to acting classes, public speaking courses, all that type of stuff. So it seems like it's not fair, but when you look at all of the effort that they put into these people, training them and putting them on a pedestal, putting them in front of 2-3 million people per week, it's kind of like, I don't know. And I personally don't like it. I think they should just go ahead and let them, because I don't know how much money they're making on Twitch anyway, and I don't think it matters that much. Like, I don't think, it probably cuts into one of their business models, which might be another problem, like Cameo, or I think Cameo also cuts into one of their business models. And I think that's maybe the major problem, is that, it cuts into one of their business models, and they kind of want to be compensated for that loss of revenue. But that's a conversation way off the subject of what I'm talking about now. I'm talking about labor unions right now. So, like I was saying, what was I talking about when it comes to labor unions? I was reading this thing. Okay. So yeah, money wages go up with productivity. So you have, money wages, you just increasing wages. The real wage is based off productivity. So it says, the truth is that the means by which the standard of living of the individual wage earner and the individual businessman and capitalist is increased. And that means by which that of the average wage earner in the economic system is increased are very different. For the individual, it is the earning of more money. For the average wage earner in the economic system, it is the payment of lower prices. What this discussion shows is that the increase in money wages that labor unions seek is not at all the source of rising real wages, and that the source of rising real wages is in fact a rising productivity of labor, which always operates from the side of falling prices, not rising money wages. Now, this is economic jargon. So, let's continue. Hopefully it's not, this is pretty long. I'm gonna try not to make it super dry. Indeed, the efforts of labor unions to raise money wages are profoundly opposed to the goal of raising real wages and the standard of living. When the unions seek to rise the standard of living of their members by means of raising their money wages, their policy inevitably comes down to an attempt to make the labor of their members artificially scarce. In other words, they are artificially raising the wage. They're not raising productivity. They're just raising the cost. And much like in these plants or something like that, they would say, well, you have to have skilled labor, and it's like, yeah, in some trades, skilled labor makes sense. If you're a carpenter or an electrician, or you're a welder or something like that, you need special training. If you want to be a welder or something like that, you can't just come off the street and be a welder. You could kill somebody or kill yourself. If you want to jump off the street and be a carpenter, you cut your goddamn hands off with a saw or something like that. You need to be trained. It makes sense in sort of that realm. In certain realms, labor unions do make sense, even though they still may be a negative, but that would be beyond the scope of this conversation. For instance, a matter of fact, I'll just say it here. Labor unions that stretch across industries are a bad thing. It's labor unions for specific areas are good, but labor unions that stretch across industries are bad. An example, if you wanted to have GM had its own labor union and Chrysler had its own labor union, that would be fine, okay? But having the UAW, which crosses GM, Chrysler, Ford, and all these other, that's negative because it creates a monopoly on the wage, on the workforce. Monopolies are bad. Monopolies is a bad thing no matter which side it's supposed to be on. So theoretically, the workers could make more money if they broke up the labor unions and said, okay, we don't want anything to do with them. We are GM workers. We need to unify as GM workers and only collectively bargain with GM. Then you might be able to make more money because you're not tagged into whatever is going on Ford, whatever's going on with Chrysler, and all that type of things. It's easier for you to negotiate because you have a relationship with the individual company. It also opens up competition because if somebody doesn't want to deal with this particular labor union because they're being hard asses, then there can be another labor union that can come in and take your place. And then other people can say, oh, this labor union sucks, I'm going to go to another one. As opposed to you're stuck in this labor union, whether you like it or not, whether you like the people who run it or not. Okay, you're stuck with it. That's the idea here. But labor unions create artificial scarcity. This is the major point from this particular piece of the article. That is their only means of raising the wages of their members. The unions do not have much actual power over the demand for labor, but they often achieve considerable power over the supply of labor. In other words, they can control who becomes into the union and who doesn't, who works there and who doesn't. This is a major thing when it comes to unions. Unions were created to control the supply of labor. They're racist institutions, literally. Labor unions were created to keep niggas out. That's literally the purpose of labor unions. They have been repurposed by socialists to say, oh, well, it's good for the worker. No, it was created because Negroes were undercutting white people for jobs because they didn't understand what their real value was to the employer. And so they were able to undercut these white people who were skilled, but they wanted too much money for the job. So a good capitalist is going to go for the cheaper labor. And the cheaper labor would be usually barely literate, just above slave labor. And if you got to pay a guy a nickel to do this job, why would you pay a white man a dime to do it when you could hire 2 Negroes to do it for a nickel a piece? You get it done twice as fast. It's common sense, right? So what this article is telling you is that labor unions can't control the demand for labor. They control the supply of labor. So they control how many people work in a place or who can work in a place. Okay? That's what they do. And their actual technique for raising wages is to make the supply of labor, at least in the particular industry or occupation that a given union is concerned with, as scarce as possible. In other words, what did I just say? They want to artificially create scarcity. And they do that by limiting the amount of labor in the pool. They create artificial unemployment. Labor unions suck. They suck really bad. Thus, whenever they can, unions attempt to control over entry into the labor market. They seek to impose apprenticeship programs or to have licensing requirements imposed by the government. Such measures are for the purpose of holding down the supply of labor in the field and thereby enabling those fortunate enough to be admitted to it to earn higher incomes. Even when the unions do not succeed in directly reducing the supply of labor, the imposition of their above market wage demands still has the effect of reducing the number of jobs offered in the field and thus the supply of labor in the field that is able to find work. In other words, if WWE had a union, they would have to lay people off. They would have to cut the number of jobs. That is what unions do. I've been saying this ever since people keep talking about unions on this channel. Ever since I've talked about unions on this channel, I keep saying the same shit. They will have to artificially create scarcity. In other words, WWE would have to let a lot of people go because the union would not want all of those people in it. It would drive down the wages. They want wages higher, which means pretty much most of the performance center talent would be gone. A lot of people from NXT would be gone. You may say, well, those people don't matter anyway. Well, I say Randy Orton makes $4 million. You really want to take Randy Orton? You really want to cut some 4 or 5, maybe 10 people just so Randy Orton can have health insurance? He can already afford fucking health insurance. That's stupid. Like, oh well, we gotta lay off 15 people because heaven for fucking bid, Roman Reigns have to pay his own health insurance. Stupid. It's stupid. Okay, it's stupid. Don't do that. Leave these people alone. Even the people that they're just training that aren't really doing much, but they're training because maybe one day, maybe they'll go out somewhere else. That also be a thing. Tainara Conti, WWE trained her. She couldn't get in because she wasn't really all that good. So she left and was able to get experience working at AEW. She was able to do that because there's no labor union. So she wasn't forced to pay anybody in order to train in WWE. And then she was able to take what she learned and go somewhere else, which is what Paige can do if she wanted to. If she's so valuable, take your ass to AEW. She's not going to do that though because she's not valuable. She's not good for anything. Okay, let's continue through this article. Man, I got time today, baby. The artificial wage increases imposed by the labor unions result in unemployment when above market wages are imposed throughout the economic system. This situation exists when it is possible for unions to be formed easily if, as in the present-day United States, all that is required is for the majority of workers in an establishment to decide that they wish to be represented by a union, then the wages imposed by the unions will be effective even in the non-union fields. In other words, if WWE was to create a union, it would force other non-unionized areas to raise their wages. Because then it would be like, well, shit, look at how much money so-and-so is making in WWE. There's going to be 100 million people trying to jump ship, especially if they're giving away health benefits. You're going to have a bunch of people working in other companies. They're going to be like, damn, I may have to jump ship. And it's really going to harm all the other companies. You're going to shrink the industry. That's another thing unions do. They shrink industries. There used to be many car companies in the United States. Then they unionized, and now we're down to 3. And it's the same 3 motherfuckers it's always been. So if you drive a shitty American car, it's because we can't create any new cars. That's why electric cars can't catch on, because it's unionized. Electric cars would not be so expensive. Hell, gas guzzling cars wouldn't be so expensive if it wasn't made with union labor. Good Lord. Employers in the non-union fields will feel compelled to offer their workers wages comparable to what the union workers are receiving. Indeed, possibly even still higher wages in order to assure that they do not unionize. Vince McMahon already does this. Okay, Vince McMahon has to do this because sports does it, right? Vince McMahon has to pay Brock Lesnar, I don't know, what was it, $5 million Brock Lesnar makes? $4 million maybe? Some insane number like that. Because Brock, football players make about that. I think football players probably make more than that. Basketball players definitely make more than that, and Brock has options as far as jumping ship to UFC and going back and forth and all that type of stuff. And other people don't have those sort of options. But, you have to increase. But let's talk about that, by the way, because I see a lot of people saying like, well, look, these guys make $100 million in the NFL. It's like, dude, are you serious? The NFL is seasonal, which means they only play a certain amount of seasons. And then plus, the careers of an NFL player are shorter than the careers of a pro wrestler. Like, you will very, very rarely find an NFL player as old as Brock Lesnar is. I'm talking about 41, 42. That's still very young. You're a very young man at 42. You have another 20 some odd years ahead of you. But in the NFL, you're too old and you're too slow already. No matter the position. At 40, you're too old and too slow. You're going to have a difficult time finding a job. Same thing in the NBA. Your marketplace value is up front. You're worth more at 20 than you are at 40. In wrestling, it might be the opposite. Like Brock Lesnar is worth more money now than he was at 22, 23 years old. Same thing with Chris Jericho. At 20, as a wrestler, with only a couple of years in the business, you ain't worth shit, really. When you get 40, you probably, you got some experience to you. If you're good, you may be worth a lot more money. Look at AJ Styles. AJ Styles in 2000 versus when AJ Styles came in 2016. He was worth a lot more money. He's fucking good. You have to take that into account when people compare WWE to the NFL or WWE to the NBA or whatever. These guys make $100 million because they have to survive for months without income, because they only play seasonal games. They have to survive months without income. That's the first problem. Second thing is they're going to end up retiring before a wrestler would. Okay? That's another thing. And then you also have a proliferation of problems when it comes to athletes still ended up being broke. I'm going to put my favorite article ever written in the description that talks about millionaire athletes going broke because they don't know how to manage money. Because many of them were given millions of dollars at 18. They have no fucking idea how to use money. It's not about the money, man. It's about how you manage it. And it's always going to be the case. So it's not going to work, dog. Let's get back to this article. Widespread wage increases, closing large numbers of workers out of numerous occupations put extreme pressure on the wage rates of whatever areas of the economic system may still remain open. These limited areas could absorb the overflow of workers from other lines at low enough wage rates. But minimum wage laws prevent wage rates in these remaining lines from going low enough to absorb these workers. From the perspective of most of the lucky enough to keep their jobs, the most serious consequences of the unions is the holding down or outright reduction of the productivity of labor. With few exceptions, the labor unions openly combat the rise in the productivity of labor. In other words, it incentivizes laziness, which is what guaranteed contracts do. WWE has guaranteed contracts right now. Like I just said, people are salaried. Back in the day, a guy got paid for how many hours from, his, based off the cut that he would get off the show. Now, this is a Hall and Nash creation, the guaranteed contract. You would get a guaranteed set of money, let's go say $100,000 or whatever, right? And that you get that regardless of how you produce. So what is your incentive to do better? What is your incentive to do more? There is none, because you're guaranteed $100,000 per year, whether you're in the main event, whether you're in the opening match, or whether you sit in catering all day. You're guaranteed that amount of money. You're locked into that. Vince McMahon can't come and be like, look, hey, pal, I thought you were a main event talent. Turns out you're not. We're going to cut your pay. You can be like, nope. Guaranteed contract. You got to give me that money. Now, he's not going to be stupid enough to give you, $1 million and you go sit in catering. He's not that stupid. He's going to get something out of you, pay you $1 million. But there are people sitting in catering who make six figures, and you probably don't remember what they look like. So for everybody who's talking about how, WWE just takes advantage of people. What about all the people who are taking advantage of WWE? There's a lot of people taking advantage of them who aren't doing anything. I'm pretty sure some of them are going to show up on Raw. Some of them are going to show up on SmackDown. They haven't done anything. Like, they have so many people under contract that don't produce. So many. The 80-20 rule is a real thing. Outside of a very few wrestlers on the roster, most people are on money loss. If you look at how much money they make compared to how many t-shirts they sell, compared to how many, trading cards or whatever the hell they sell, gimmicks, they lose money. It's a money loss. You're not a draw, is what I'm saying. Most people in wrestling are not a draw. You're a card filler. So in other words, there are more people taking advantage of WWE than they are taking advantage of. Because WWE have to squeeze the people who do make money in order to pay the people who don't make money. All right. Let's get back to this article, man. I'm probably not going to end up reading this whole thing because I've been talking long enough. They do so virtually as a matter of principle. They oppose the introduction of labor-saving machinery on the grounds that it causes unemployment. They oppose competition among workers, which is how raises you might get increase in productivity, increase in wages. As Henry Hazlitt pointed out, they force employers to tolerate feather bedding practices, such as classic requirement that firemen whose function was to shovel coal on a steam locomotive be retained on diesel locomotives. They impose make-work schemes, such as requiring that pipe discovered to construction sites with screw thread already on it have its ends cut off and a new screw thread cut on the site. They impose narrow work classifications and require that specialists be employed at a day's pay to perform work that others could do. For example, requiring the employment of a plasterer to repair the incidental damage done by a wall by an electrician, which the electrician himself could easily repair. In other words, they create more jobs so they can make more union dues. Okay, so I don't know how this would work in sports. They may have an increase of the bench. You may have to hire more people as far as your training squads and all that type of stuff, so that they can make more money off of those guys. And then you may expand the number of players on the team or something like that. But this is tiring, and this is still there's not a lot left. Let's read this. I'm gonna try to read it without interruption again. I'm sorry. I'm really excited about this whole union thing. It really gets my go, as Conan and Disco Inferno likes to say, or as I prefer to say, it really roasts my almonds. To anyone who understands the role of the productivity of labor in raising real wages, it should be obvious that the union's policy of combating the rise in the productivity of labor renders them, in fact, a leading enemy of the rise in real wages. However radical this conclusion may seem, however much at odds it is with the prevailing view of the unions as the leading source of the rise in real wages over the last 150 years or more, the fact is that in combating the rise in the productivity of labor, the unions actively combat the rise in real wages. In other words, they prefer the empty stuff like $15 an hour minimum wage because it sounds good, as opposed to you actually earning $8 an hour, but you having created some real value at $8 an hour. And therefore, you would probably keep your full $8 an hour. As opposed to, well, it's $15 an hour, yeah, but we're going to tax the hell out of it. So it's not really $15 an hour. Far from being responsible for the improvements in the standard of living of the average worker, labor unions operate in more or less total ignorance of what actually raises the average worker's standard of living. In consequence of their ignorance, they are responsible for artificial inequalities in wage rates for unemployment, and for holding down real wages and the average worker's standard of living. All of these destructive antisocial consequences derive from the fact that while individuals increase the money they earn through increased production and the overall supply of goods and services, thereby reducing prices and raising real wages throughout the economic system, labor unions increase the money paid to their members by exactly the opposite means. They reduce the supply of and productivity of labor, and so reduce the supply and raise the prices of the goods and services their members help to produce, thereby reducing real wages throughout the economic system. The end of that article. Okay. So I've been at this for a half hour already, and I still haven't gotten to what I talked about. I was going to talk about SAG. So let's talk about SAG, man. I think you're about to see what this article means in real terms when we talk about SAG. Now, SAG, let's go to the benefits. It says member benefits for SAG-AFTRA. This is for actors, by the way, for people who don't know. This is a labor union for actors. There's a health and pension plan. There's contracts of collective bargaining, casting workshops, foundations, discounts and deals and discounts for car rentals, insurance, medical visits, prescriptions, etc. Contracts covering low budget student films, tools for young performers, SAG award voting privileges, etc., etc. But what are some of the downsides of working of SAG? Which is people never talk about that. What does it mean to work for SAG? Okay, so it says you have to be eligible. You have to meet an eligibility requirement. What is the eligibility requirement? This is from their website. Once a performer's eligibility verification is completed, the performer will receive a letter of eligibility from SAG-AFTRA. The eligibility letter is only mailed once. I forget I don't see what the eligibility is, but I know it's like a certain amount of hours per film or something. Okay, here you go. What are the eligibility requirements for SAG-AFTRA membership? A performer becomes eligible for SAG-AFTRA membership under one of the following conditions. Proof of SAG-AFTRA, SAG or AFTRA employment or employment under an affiliated performers union. Here's what you need to qualify. Now, remember what that article said. There's going to be special work requirements, licensing, etc., etc. They're going into that right now. SAG-AFTRA membership is available to those who work in the position covered by SAG-AFTRA or SAG or AFTRA collective bargaining agreement, provided that any person qualifying through work as a background actor must have completed 3 days of work as a background actor under a SAG-AFTRA or SAG collective bargaining agreement. Membership is also available to those who work 1 day of employment in a principal or speaking role, actor or performer, or as a recording artist in a SAG-AFTRA or SAG covered production. Performers may join SAG-AFTRA if the applicant is a paid-up member of an affiliated performers union, such as ACTRA, AEA, AGMA, or AGVA, it's a bunch of labor unions, for a period of 1 year. It has worked and been paid for at least once as a principal performer in that union's jurisdiction. Potential broadcast members should contact National Broadcast Department on their local for information for joining. So you can't just walk up and join SAG, okay? They created all these artificial barriers to entry because they have they get all these sweetheart deals. But there is something else going on here. Well, you do have to pay an initiation fee, but it's nothing. It's like $3,000, which is the national. You have to pay national dues, but the initiation fee is only $3,000, which is, it's not a lot if you worked. It's not a lot if you work like in a movie or, if you something like that. $3,000 is not a lot. I don't know how much the dues are, which I really want to look up. But let's see. Let's see here. He said, I'm eligible to join SAG-AFTRA, but I've remained non-union. At what point in my career should I join? Are you serious about your career? Are you auditioning on union projects? Have you landed at least one principal or 3 background roles? If you can answer yes to those 3 questions, then it's time to join SAG-AFTRA. For someone who wants a serious career, staying non-union only means being exploited longer. Notice the loaded language. They always say that you're being exploited. Being exploited is essentially a state of mind. If you're getting what you want, which is experience in the industry, you're getting paid, and you're getting experience in the industry, how are you being exploited? They didn't explain. Every professional performer who remains in the non-union talent pool undercuts the livelihood and work opportunities of all professional performers. Isn't this what the article said about they try to artificially make the work scarce? In other words, the more non-union labor you have, the less our stuff is worth. Meaning, we have to sign up people to join this goddamn union, or the quality of our work or the monetary value of our work goes down. They literally, God just said this, right? Oh boy. What happens if I accept non-union work? When a performer becomes a member of SAG-AFTRA, he or she is agreeing from that point forward to abide by all the rules and regulations of SAG-AFTRA. Our Constitution and bylaws not only spells out members' rights as a professional union performer, but also specifies members' responsibilities and obligations. So you can't just do whatever you want. There are obligations and regulations involved, responsibilities, quote unquote. Refer to Global 1, Rule 9 below. Global Rule 1. SAG-AFTRA members cannot accept an acting role in any studio, independent, low-budget, pilot, experimental, nonprofit, interactive, educational, student, or any production unless that producer has a signed contract or letter of agreement with SAG-AFTRA. In other words, if you sign up for this union, you can only work for people who have already signed up for this union. In other words, you don't control what you do anymore. They do. They control what you do. because you can only work for the people that they say you can work for. But hey, it will require you actually doing some research, learning about this stuff. Rule 9. By joining SAG-AFTRA, members all agree to abide by Rule 9, which states that members of one of the affiliated performers unions, there's a bunch of different performers unions for actors and musical artists, will not accept non-union work in another union's jurisdiction. In other words, you can't even go to another jurisdiction and work. Once you accept SAG, the SAG card, it's a goddamn golden leash. Like, yeah, you got the SAG card, you might get benefits, etc., but you can't go do whatever you want. It'd be the same thing. You know, like, why would you want to have the golden leash? You know, I said this before in a previous video, but you should want to just have your benefits, because then you could take your benefits and go wherever you want, as opposed to, well, I'm tied to this particular company because my benefits come from this company. That's what you're really trying to do to wrestlers when you say WWE should really just be paying their health insurance. Really? Because then they wouldn't have health insurance when they leave. It's very difficult for a wrestler to get health insurance. Okay, then you would have people who would just, they be signing up for the health insurance. And they'd be the most miserable motherfuckers in the world, if we being honest. They'd be miserable as hell. Because there's nothing more miserable than a person who has to work somewhere, because if they quit, then the kids don't have health insurance and stuff like that anymore. And regular folks deal with that. Never seen that from wrestlers before. Most of them quit a job because they got money. They'll quit. Like, I don't like this. I'm out of here, bye. You know. Rule 9 states, it shall be conduct considered an action antagonistic to the interest and integrity of the union for a member of the union to accept employment in the jurisdiction of any other branch of the 4 A's for an employer whose employees are represented by the other branch, unless the member seeking such employment first inquires of the other branch to ascertain whether the employer is a signatory to the collective bargaining agreement with the other branch. It shall be conduct considered an action antagonistic to the interest and integrity of the union if the member of the union accepts employment with an employer in the jurisdiction of another branch after having been advised by the other branch that. In other words, members who are found in violation of these rules are subject to serious fines and discipline by a panel of union peers. In other words, if you are in WWE, and WWE is being the biggest wrestling company in the world, if you decide, I'm going to get me a SAG card, I'm going to bring, SAG to WWE, what's going to happen? You can't go work in AEW. You can't go work in Impact. You can't go work at Ring of Honor. You can only work where they tell you can work. They're limiting your options. So if WWE started falling under SAG, all the other promotions would have to do it, or they wouldn't be able to, a wrestler wouldn't even be able to go backwards. You would have to work in WWE or nowhere. Why would you want to do that? Does that sound like something you would want to do? Please, I hope you listen to this video up to this point. This is stupid. And this is from the SAG-AFTRA website. They're telling you cannot go work for anyone else. This is stupid. It's stupid. Okay? I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what more do I need to say on the subject of slave labor unions. It's all been said. This is the big, fat video on labor unions. The shit sucks. I used to be in a labor union. It sucks. Listen to me. I'm speaking from a lived experience. It sucks. But hey, Paige, the rest of you guys, if you guys are completely sold on the labor union idea, hey, ain't nothing I can say. I can just provide you with the information. But thank you guys for listening. Like this video. If you want to buy me lunch, then hit the Cash App. Send me about $5 or $10. If not, don't worry about it. But thank you guys for listening again. Spread this video around as much as possible. Anytime somebody brings up labor unions, even if they bring up SAG, talk about this. This is why there are no competition to the NFL or to the XFL. I mean, not the XFL. I mean, there cannot be any competition to the NFL or the NBA. While they're both monopolies, is because they're unionized. Therefore, even the players who are sitting on the bench of the NFL, who could probably go to the XFL and be stars, they don't want to do that because then they lose their union benefits. So they're stuck sitting on the bench where they could be probably making more money working somewhere else because they don't want to take that risk. People are naturally risk averse, and I completely understand that. But you would think that if you're a good quarterback and you're sitting on the bench, all year, if another league opens up, wouldn't you kind of be like, well, shit, I could probably be a star there. I could probably be a starter in that league. Nope, because they're not unionized. So that means you're not going to, if you take the risk and leave the NFL, you may make that team. You may be a starter on that team, but the XFL doesn't have the stability of the NFL. Same thing with other people who try to create these different basketball leagues. I've laid it out already. I'm just talking in circles now. But thank you guys for listening. Share this video around. I'm going to talk to you guys later. Peace.